It's lovely to be back here with everyone. I will go through kind of who we have today. Fred already kind of did introductions, but Seamus is new to Hammerspace, at least in this audience. Maybe just give a little introduction, your role, background.
Yes, first of all, thanks for having us. This is an absolutely beautiful location. So I am the VP for Sales and Business Development for EMEA and India at Hammerspace. Joined the business about 6 months ago, and it's been a roller coaster ever since then. So delighted to be here with you today, and looking forward to sharing as much as we can with you in the next 90 minutes or so.
Absolutely, and so he'll give a bit of business strategy and business updates. So I know there's often questions about channel strategy, where we have people, those types of things. Seamus is the person to answer that. And then Dan Ruger is not here. He did a recorded video for us. Since he can't be here, there's a couple of really big events going on in the US right now that have subsumed our entire company. Supercomputing 25 is going on in St. Louis, and then NVIDIA is doing internal training for some of their strategic partners. So half our team's with NVIDIA and half our team is at supercomputing right now.
You know, Molly's one of our superheroes. Molly just flew in this morning from Supercomputer. So, so I think maybe a quick round of applause for Molly, because I don't know how she's still standing.
Molly really wanted to be at Technology Live.
I did. I annoyed Fred a little bit because I missed an email or two, but we got it done. But the timing of this often is very close to supercomputing, which works great. No, but it's good because a lot of news is planned around that time too. So it's very timely from that perspective. So I like it actually from that perspective. It just means a red-eye flight once on occasion. So Dan is really neat. He will be at one of these, I'm sure, in the future. We hired him over from Oracle. He was one of the product marketing folks at Oracle Cloud. And as that relationship has been really blossoming, there were some questions about how Tier 0 is going, which we talked about a year ago here. Oracle is rapidly adopting Tier 0 within their infrastructure, and they wanted some of their people in our company so that it was easier to just get stuff done. So Dan was one of those people that kind of, in a very amicable way, moved from Oracle to Hammerspace to help make some of this transition happen quickly. So I have some of his content, and he made a nice video for us that I will show as a kind of a product demo later. We'll talk about EMEA strategy and then go through some of the updates we've had announcements recently in the last few weeks with NVIDIA as well as with Oracle. Talk a little bit about what those were about. This week we announced a new release of our software, our 5.2 release, which really is a part of what led to some of the news we're announcing today is our IO 500 benchmark results that will come out at Supercomputing today. I'll talk through that with you, and then as soon as the press release is available, we'll make sure to get it to you. I would send it to you now, but we want to see the list and make sure the press release we wrote is correct in case some other submission comes in that we're not expecting. So we need to see the list before we share that out and the messaging that we have around that. And then we have a new customer win story going out at Supercomputing today with Vanderbilt University, which is really interesting. It's a place where we displaced Vidura, and it's kind of an interesting economic case study that I'll share with you as well. So as we jump into this, and I hand it over to Seamus, wanted to just give you kind of a high-level update of where we're seeing our business growing right now. On the end user side, as a lot of you probably are aware, we started out in really big accounts, focused on Meta was kind of our big key customer that we went to market with early. That was in training, Llama 2, Llama 3, Llama 4. How we got the attention with Oracle was kind of a combination of two things. One, Meta uses us in Oracle now, so they've shifted how they do training from data center based to using GPUs wherever they can find them, where there's GPUs that have power. So Hammerspace has been able to give them the flexibility that as they're moving and say, oh, I need some more GPUs for this particular training job, I can use a NeoCloud, I can use Oracle, and Hammerspace can facilitate that. We then grew towards Gary Greider, who is the HPC director of Los Alamos National Labs and kind of the grandfather of nearly every parallel file system out there, as an advisor to Hammerspace. and has been working with us on our PNFS strategy and how do we really make this standards-based parallel file system a reality. So big adoption in some of the big national labs. But now we've started to scale out our business to the larger enterprises, manufacturing companies, organizations that are doing a lot in biotech research and genomics research. So it's outside of just traditional HPC and kind of the neo-scale type companies and into Fortune 500, the larger enterprises. And where our fit there has tended to be is in that idea of, I'm sure you get sick of hearing about AI, but it's the idea of getting your organization AI ready, that they know they're going to be doing something with AI at some point. They have a lot of silos of data, a lot of silos of infrastructure that they've invested in, and they use Hammerspace to get that all organized, as the term NVIDIA uses, into a unified data estate. And that's what NVIDIA is really excited about the Hammerspace partnership for, is we can make all of this data into a unified data estate, so when you do inference, when you're doing RAG, your data is already prepared for that. So that's kind of where we've been getting a lot of success in the enterprise. Company's growing, we're doing a good job. I have a question, yeah.
What's your smallest implementation?
I'm sorry?
What's your smallest implementation in terms of petabytes?
I mean, we have some companies who will start with us in just a virtual machine with 30 or 40 terabytes. It doesn't have to be very big. They can spin us up out of a cloud marketplace and start fairly small. The limiting factor there is if you want redundant metadata, if you want redundancy in your infrastructure, it's kind of expensive to do just 30 or 40 terabytes with us. But that's often the starting point with the intention to add more capacity over time. That would be the lowest probably I think we have in our install base. But our average customer is usually starting around a petabyte or so. And I mean, we have customers who have hundreds and hundreds of petabytes in us. So it's pretty flexible.
Starting small, though, has been a great advantage for us because some customers have been burned in failed POCs, I think, in the last couple of years trying to get going. So they're trying to do something smaller, so start small and scale from there. So definitely having the flexibility of being able to start small, that's definitely proven to be an advantage for a certain customer set.
Have you had anybody who's collected all these petabytes of data and found there was no value in it when they came to actually mine it?
No value in the data itself or in Hammerspace?
Well, no value in the data itself. It occurs to me.
Probably. I mean,
you have to ask the right question.
You do. I mean, I was just at the supercomputing conference and talking to Guardant Health, who has coming up on about an exabyte of data, and they're a genomics research company, one of the larger ones. And their challenge is they have this exabyte. Researchers by nature don't like to ever delete anything. There's my data, publish or perish, is all, all the behaviors we all know about. And they want to, one, just have better insights into what data they have for collaboration. So if you could harvest Guardant's data set for a different research project that's not happening at Guardant, but maybe help develop a new drug or something, that's great. So just having the metadata so they can even know what they have, because they don't know. They don't have universal metadata. So of that exabyte, I mean, I'm making this number up. I'm sure it's a small fraction of it that will ever really be needed, but they don't know what they don't know. So it's worth it to them for that reason. And of course, they'll do something AI-ish some way. They don't know exactly what, but to them it's more around using that term again, the data is staking, organized, having metadata, and they enrich their metadata with all kinds of healthcare related things, which sequencer and all that kind of thing. There's enough impetus to doing that right now that where in the past, it was kind of like, yeah, we know we're not very good at this, at organizing our data and capturing it. They care enough to invest in it now, but I don't think we've ever had anyone say they didn't find anything valuable. But it's still very early days.
I guess I was just thinking that all the effort we put into understanding data analysis and so on, back in the 1980s. Then we stopped doing it. It didn't seem to have any bad effects at all. And now we're starting doing it again.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting thing. You know, I was talking to Gary Greider, I was having dinner with him last night, and asking him, like, how do you see machine learning versus AI affecting your space? They do nuclear research, you know, they make nuclear weapons. And to him, it was about machine learning. You kind of had to know what questions you were asking, and in AI, it's easier to explore things you don't even think to ask of. That was the way his very analytical brain thinks about it. And so, you know, a different way to slice the problem and come up with things you didn't know you didn't to ask might make a change, you know?
I'm just worried that people don't, they talk about AI as one thing. There's a huge difference between machine learning and deterministic AI and generative AI. And the concern I have is that people are starting to see AI as magic and not actually thinking about what the data, you know, checking the data and just getting answers out of this black box.
Yep.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty interesting, and this isn't really what we're here to talk about, but I was asking Gary, so you have nuclear data, and obviously that's carefully controlled for a million reasons, and you want to train a model, and they have a partnership with OpenAI, and so they took an OpenAI model, and then they're training it with nuclear data. And I was asking him why, what are you going to do with that? And his goal with it was, as they look at these nuclear weapons on a ship or wherever they are, and maybe they see a little leakage of some foam coming off of the device or something like that, they can then ask the model to look at all the different use cases that it's had and identify, do you think this is going to be a problem? Should we address it? Do the test simulations, like a digital simulation of some worst case scenarios if that did have problems, and make a decision rather quickly around should we pull the weapon and fix it? And he said we couldn't do that with machine learning. Machine learning was too linear, and the AI offers you the ability to handle all these things, and then you can train it to know its limits. Say you cannot break physics. Here's the laws of physics. AI model you can't break, and you need to raise your hands and say, call a human. And it does it all the time. I thought it was kind of interesting. I mean, there's a lot of really interesting learning happening.
Molly, I'm curious about, as you're moving into the enterprise, what you're learning about the personas who own this problem or own this function, because this is something that spans kind of the infrastructure layer, the data layer, the application layer, and lines of business. So I'm curious about, especially since the value prop seems to be about getting in front of this before you actually start rolling out or necessarily deploying at scale. This is about kind of unifying that data in advance of, deriving some benefit. That's a
good question.
Tricky
it is a
thing
good,
to sell, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And it is a good question. If you look at the AIDP business, this AI data platform business, as NVIDIA calls it, they're doing a training right now in San Jose on it. And I think this is okay to say, at GTC DC a few weeks ago, there had been the intention for NVIDIA to roll something else out, and Jensen decided not to because he wants them to focus on AIDP more. Like, let's get this deployed, understood, all these things. And it ties back to what you're talking about is an AI data platform, and we'll talk about that later in this presentation, what it is and that kind of thing, but has significant advantages in enterprise inference. And so, but who do you sell it to? And that was actually the slide, the guy who runs AI for us as a company sent the slide to me. That was the opening slide NVIDIA had of, so who are we going to sell this thing to? So we are still figuring it out, but who they had, and would kind of mirror who our campaigns go to, is the influencers of the data users, or like the data scientists, the data engineers. It's a little different than the infrastructure buyers. It doesn't seem to be them. The infrastructure buyers, the CTO, the AI infrastructure persona, was very involved in buying GPUs and whatever infrastructure they needed around that. They're not so involved in inference, it doesn't seem, because that's just, I already have data, I already have infrastructure, I'm working a business problem with it. So we think the influencers will be those data engineers, but Are they going to have budget? I don't know, honestly. It's still very nebulous as who's making those decisions and who has budget.
The bubble might burst.
Huh?
The bubble might burst.
It could.
NVIDIA's stock might fall.
It could.
I think it also depends on the specific customers. What we're seeing is that certain customers, they're redefining their strategy. So rather than having a strategy that's very infrastructure-led, they're having a strategy that's more data-centric. Mm-hmm. And those strategic decisions, then your buyer is further up the food chain in the organization, as opposed to another enterprise. You could be having a meeting with them in the afternoon, and they're just looking at AI as a point project, and the decision making is probably with the storage team, for example. So that's part of the assessment that we and our partners need to make early in the engagement with the customer. It's not a product sales engagement, it's definitely a consultative engagement. Because really where you want the customers to be is at that strategic end, thinking about this strategically. It's like years ago, I remember a buddy of mine worked for Ogilvy, just as digital was coming down the tracks, and he suggested that they needed a digital organization, and he was trying to impart upon them everything is going to be digital. This is not a side project, it's not another little team. So we're kind of going through that transition, I think, with the enterprises as well. So in the really, I would say in the companies that are at the forefront of this trend, it's CFO, CEO level discussions, for sure. Yeah, but unfortunately, it's a mix.
Yeah.
So do you want to roll in and just give an update on what we're doing in EMEA and India right now?
Yeah, so right now we have boots on the ground here in the UK, in Germany. We've boots on the ground now, thankfully, next month in the Middle East, and we're well established in India as well. And what we're doing from these bases is starting to build up our partner ecosystem. So we've got a global business development organization that focuses on our strategic partners like NVIDIA, like OCI, Azure, and we have some exciting new partners that we'll be able to talk about probably now in another couple of months. So part of our role here in the region is to make sure that we're extracting the value out of those global partners here at a regional level. And of course, how they operate in North America is different to how they operate in the UK and in Germany and India, etc. So that's how we're basing ourselves. Now, we're also serving other markets out of those core markets. And what we're doing here with our partners now is that we're building up from the bottom up between distribution and other specialized partners. We're building up from the bottom up to meet those strategic partners. So a lot of times those strategic partners will work with somebody like a Boston or a Broadberry in the local market. So we're obviously building those local relationships, have those local relationships. And so we're kind of meeting in the middle, and I'll talk about that.
Just before you carry on there,
Yeah.
You've got UK, Germany, Middle East, India, which is great for Northern Europe, but just as Europe flies differently from North America, Europe's not a coherent entity.
Vision.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we're a growing company, so we'll evolve our strategy to meet, obviously, the market as we grow. So, in 2 or 3 years' time, we will look like that kind of a mature organization that you're describing. But right now, these are the right markets for us to man-mark and for us to start with. And I think what you'll see is that a lot of our partners are in all of those markets already. So us proving to them that we can deliver for them in the core markets that we've chosen to start with, it's very easy for us to take that and to scale that into other markets from there. The big difference, obviously, here on this side of the water is the sovereignty question, all right? And we've a super story for sovereignty. The challenge for the planet with data is that it's really chaotically sitting in silos, right? And from a HPC and an AI perspective, obviously you want your quality data to hit your pipeline at a performance level that gives you better outcomes than your competitors, right? But what's going on at the moment, obviously, is that there's stranded data all over the organization. right? So there's a movement happening, and that movement includes a movement in the mindset of the partners as well, because a lot of partners that have had a infrastructure go-to-market strategy what they're finding and what the industry is finding is that decades of selling infrastructure has led to more of a feature and kind of a box selling sales ecosystem, right? And that doesn't lend itself naturally to a shift to a consultative approach, right? So what we're finding, going back to the top-down, bottom-up ecosystem development approach, what we're finding actually to our surprise, great surprise, is partners popping their head above the parapet that we wouldn't have expected, right? And even the current giants in the industry like NVIDIA and OCI and Azure would say the same thing, right? That it's not always the usual suspects that they see are making the greatest progress, today, right now. So data sovereignty is definitely one of the issues that's driving a massive demand here. It'll be very interesting to see how quickly the neocloud solutions and the government-led solutions in each of the different regions, bottom out to be proper commercial solutions. We've been listening to data sovereignty from Germany and France probably for 15 years, right? And there's been a number of failed attempts to get things working. It seems to have, the pendulum does seem to have swung though. And I think the public-private partnerships definitely seem to be taking a stronger foothold than certainly I've seen in my career in the last 15 years. So we're very excited about that at Hammerspace, but we're picking our battles, we're picking our core markets, because we've got opportunities across the region, we're obviously serving other markets from these core markets. And we're taking advantage of all the hard work the guys are doing in North America with our strategic alliances, as much as building our local partners as well.
If I look at your map, then it's really grayed out in some very strategic markets in Europe.
Yes.
Why are they grayed out?
They're only grayed out because the way I operate is very straightforward. I could have greened everything. I could say we can serve everywhere from the UK or from Germany or the Middle East. But for me, they're the core markets that we're serving today I would say in a properly active manner. So in the markets that are green, we're very close to putting boots on the ground. But in the grey markets, we're obviously, we're software defined. We can serve all those markets very readily.
But as a company, we have more opportunity right now than we can serve with our support team, with our technicals and everything. We don't need to go to more geographies to meet our numbers. We have to do a good job in the markets we're in, build them, get reliable customers. So we are very careful about not growing too fast in places where we're just not ready. So they could be fantastic markets, and we're just not big enough. And we've only been in business selling product for just about 4 years now, and we're very methodical as we open up each country and what we do there.
Is there some purple in the Middle East we can't see on that?
Yeah.
There is.
Where?
In Dubai. Yeah, serving Dubai and KSA.
And that new hire is just coming on here soon.
Office in Jeddah, and then you'd have a bigger block.
Yeah.
Was there another question? I feel like.
I think. Sorry, just building on what you just said though about being selective and growing. We have an indirect model, so it's an indirect model through partners. So, part of the discovery I think that's going on in the industry is discovering which of the partners are able to deliver that consultative solution to the end customer. When AI is truly being adopted at scale, the big challenge is going to be professional services, right? So part of what we're doing in our core markets today, what we see ourselves doing is identifying and working with partners and also making sure that we are building scalable processes with them that can be delivered in other markets as well. So it's not just what we as an independent organization are doing, but it's also growing with our partners.
Globally, you guys are based in Redwood.
We are. We just moved to Redwood.
China's obviously a massive opportunity for almost any tech company. We know how weird the Americans are about exports on hardware. Do the same things apply to solutions, or is it fair game? You guys can. We're
happy to do business in China, and we are in Asia. We have actually a pretty sizable Asia team based out of Singapore. We opened that in January of this year, so we're not quite a year into that. But China's going well enough that we just hired a manager within China in addition to the individual salespeople that are
There's no
there.
limit there. If you can take the market, you can take the market.
Correct.
Yeah, we don't have any weird trade policy issues, fortunately. I mean, the issue comes to, does the customer who wants our software have hardware to run it on? Right, but they, do they have hardware or not? But they run, I mean, they sort that out, and we kind of stay away from how they've sorted it out, Sometimes they have hardware that I think they're not supposed to, but hey, that's not really our problem, so.
That was maybe my question as well. Are you worried that in a market like China, where you're not seeing the core market, they could develop a competitor to what you do? And what you do seems to be very good.
Yeah.
I would thought everybody in the world wants it. If you're only concentrating on a few markets, are there areas which feel a bit left out and develop it for themselves? Or
possibly. We're about 200 million and 10 years in to developing. Some of it we've put into the Linux kernel and that type of thing that anyone can use, and some do. When DeepSeek came out, I was in China the day that DeepSeek was announced opening Hammerspace, and they have I forget what the name of their file system is, but DeepSeek has a file system that we went and looked at, and could they create, the focus seems to be on the file system and less on the data orchestration, the data assimilation side. It could be built. It's not an easy thing to build though, and it's not easy to build and have it automated and reliable. So there's people moving our direction, from the US too. I mean, some of the data services Vast is building, we're kind of me in the middle. We have all these fantastic data services in this data layer, and the storage companies keep adding those types of data services. They don't do everything we do, but yeah, for sure, our uniqueness is becoming a little bit less unique over time, which is good, I think, because that it validates the market, it validates the customer demand. But China could develop anything if they wanted to. They're a massive tech industry. The companies, once they standardize, like a Neo Cloud or somebody like one of the big auto manufacturers, they'll probably just stick with what they've deployed too. So our investment there, will be pretty sticky too.
Does that mean one way of summarising your differentiator then, not so much the ability to create the metadata, but the ability to use it?
Say that again?
Does your differentiation really come down to then not just the ability to create metadata, which, as you say, anybody can do that, but to use it?
Absolutely. All the policy base, so ingesting and organizing into a unified data set, and then automating where the data is and why. That's why NVIDIA loves us. They didn't need another storage partner. They're not interested. They have enough. They're very interested in people who have these data services where you can automatically have visibility into every PDF in the organization. And then when you say, yep, I'm going to do something with my RAG, and I need some of them, we already know what they are and can place them next to the GPUs. For sure, that's the doing stuff with it part is the differentiation.
Yeah, and the only thing I would add to that is that it's doing that agnostic of the infrastructure so that there are no data silos. That is the huge differentiator for me, certainly talking to customers and partners.
Can I click your slide?
Yeah.
We need to kind of keep.
This slide we've kind of covered. I think, really it's talking about how we view the partner ecosystem developing and how there is a top-down and a bottom-up effort, obviously, as you get more regional and local. And I think what you're going to see more and more, BCG actually came out with a recent survey, and I think they reckon that about 5% of enterprises are kind of future ready from an AI perspective, right? And they see that number probably moving towards the 40% mark by the end of next year. It'll be interesting to see where that number truly ends up. But I think one of the things that we see that's going to help that adoption increase significantly is where these alliances and these local and regional partners meet in the middle. Because I think it's the solutions where they meet in the middle with the right kind of partners at a local and a regional level that have really, really good professional services teams. that's where the difference is going to be made, because obviously the enterprise market relies on their third-party partners and preferred vendors. And I think the big change for customers is that they need to be very, very mindful that it may not be the partners that they expect that are going to step up and deliver for them. It could very, very well be new partners. And that's part of what makes this all very, very exciting for us.
Seamus, in terms of your Central Europe customers, how much harder is it to educate them? Because, and taking the language aspect out of that, right? You've got the cultural aspect, and part of that cultural aspect is that there's a small distrust in US companies overall, and also they're a little more stubborn, let's put it gently, before I get crapping down by everybody else here.
Everybody's nodding, by the way.
That makes the sales cycle longer.
Yes.
But how much are you seeing, particularly with partners who are, you've got to educate the partners.
That's right.
And the partner then has to educate the customer.
Correct.
Right? How much more difficult are you seeing, and maybe it's a Molly question, but just overall, how much more difficult is it compared to, say, the UK?
Yeah, I don't see a huge distinction in difficulty in the sense of the difference culturally between the different markets today, believe it or not.
Brits are stubborn too? Is that what you're saying?
Brits can be stubborn too, and as an Irishman, we all know we're stubborn as well. So, there's really strong common ground actually between the different cultures, and the common ground actually is the state of the partner ecosystem, right? And so the level of professional services and the ability to have that consultative engagement that I talked about, right? Because this is not a product sell of moving a customer from version 4 of their infrastructure to version 5 of their infrastructure, right? What definitely turns the customer's head above some of the features that Molly will talk about now in a moment, when she goes through an update on the business and the platform. What most customers are expecting to prepare themselves to be effectively future ready for AI is that they have to do a monumental forklift migration, right, into a brand new singular data silo, right, which is what the infrastructure providers would like them to do, right? When they learn that that is not necessary, when they learn that they can do a very controlled and organized transition of their data, right, through a data platform like Hammerspace, where the user sees no difference. Almost iPhone-like. I use the iPhone as the example. We all use different applications. We have data sitting in different parts of the world, but whether we move from our iPhone to our iPad, as a user, we see no difference, right? And that's really what Hammerspace brings to the enterprise.
And in Europe, are you seeing more leads incoming leads, or are you having equal success out there?
One thing I would add, Ben, that's really important here, and this is why Seamus is mentioning these guys over and over again, and there's another one which we just can't announce yet. It's Cisco, just don't write that. But it's interesting to that point of they have the customer control already. So Oracle, for example, they're very visible, like they hauled us into their booth at Supercomputing, they share Ubers with us, like they love us. And it's because they already have their big customers who already have the needs and they can't serve them at Oracle, so they pull in Hammerspace. The biggest opportunities we have, and this happens in Central Europe, it happens in Central Asia, Southeast Asia, where they have already the established trust customer and they just bring Hammerspace in. It's a quick, easy sale. And we don't have to train an ecosystem and find the customers at that point. We just need to, support the sale.
And it's the reliance on the partner ecosystem. Okay.
And why we keep talking about it. And that's what's happening with NVIDIA too. And this is around inference and AIDP, not about, like SuperPod and all that stuff. This is about their next focus. And I'll talk about it here in a second. There's a couple things that only Hammerspace does right now. Maybe others will. They probably will at some point. But only Hammerspace does right now, and NVIDIA's is like, we need this for inference solutions to be broadly adopted. And so hopefully they just pull us into the deals, as our, while we do our organic, build the channel and do demand gen.
The explanation makes perfect sense.
Yeah, so I think Molly's the AIDP reference design that NVIDIA talked about at GTC a couple of weeks ago, that's a huge needle mover for the partner community and for the enterprises. Yeah.
So kind of jumping into that, what AIDP is about is, there was this initial excitement and all the vendors chasing the GPUs that were getting developed, putting storage systems next to them and that type of thing. The next focus right now in AI in the enterprise is about how do I use my infrastructure and the data that I have now to do something beneficial with AI. That's effectively what we see going on right now. And in that case, AI is running everywhere. It's using the data coming off of instruments. It's, it's the automation processes, it's the storage systems, and it's the clouds. And for that to work, you need to have a way to get this unified data estate together over all that stuff. That's something Hammerspace uniquely does today that no one else does. Some companies have global namespaces, but it's only over their infrastructure. How do you get access to the edge data without moving it into your storage system? Those are the kinds of things that a storage or infrastructure-centric approach just doesn't solve. And what they like about Hammerspace is, they being NVIDIA, leave the data in place, create a unified data state of metadata, and then when you want to do something with RAG or your data pipeline, it's all ready to point to that. And you don't have to buy anything new from an infrastructure perspective. And they see this unlocking for them what they think is the next big wave of AI, is getting enterprise RAG up and running. But if you have to tie it to an infrastructure purchase and then copy all your data to that, it slows them down. And that's why they see Hammerspace as so strategic in this place. So you think about what is it that the enterprises are looking for that we're partnering on this AIDP solution for. So first is visibility. We talked about this already, just what data do I have? Automating the pipelines is a big deal. So was it that Simon who asked about personas. That's why data scientists and data engineers are certainly influencers. They're creating the data pipelines, and if it's really manual, I was trying to see Simon's eyes while having my photo taken. I see you, Simon. But with those data pipelines, if it's really manual, if they don't have access to all the unified data and visibility, it's really hard. So we do want to empower them, for sure. And then the ultimate goal is this unified access. This is about whether it's the AI, or it's different applications, or it's GPUs, unified access to this data. So think about the world we all know really, really well, that a storage system, which has the data in it, was designed for a specific application. Maybe it was for home directories, maybe it was for the finance business unit, maybe it was some kind of HPC thing. Now we need to have multiple applications, multiple users, all have access to the same data. That was originally created and designed with a 1-to-1 ratio. So what we're looking at in this world that is really changing right now is all these different data sets need to be accessed by different applications and different people who didn't create it. They don't know anything about it. They're not the scientist who created the data and knows what it was. There's some kid coming out of college who's supposed to be finding information about data that they don't even know exists. And so that's why for enterprise AI to be really successful, you need to take these steps of knowing what data you have, making it mobile, being able to create the ability to process it with the application that wasn't the original creator. And NVIDIA sees this as such a key piece to their overall inference approach that they're really pulling us in tightly. I mean, like half of our company is at NVIDIA right now working with them on some training and how we're going to put this together. And so I kind of already talked about this. I might just skip this slide. And kind of go to here. So what does Hammerspace create in these areas? There's the unified data plane. So a single data plane that every application, every user, every model is connecting to just one data plane. But that data might be sitting in a lot of different places. Different storage systems, different clouds, different instruments, that type of thing. When you think about VAST, for example, they're starting to create some of these capabilities, but the data has to sit in VAST. And so there's for sure value in it. And when we talk to NVIDIA about the difference, to them the idea is they think to get good adoption of these data platforms, the NVIDIA AI data platform, that what is best is that people can only move the data that they actually need to do some RAG. So we provide the visibility of the million PDFs in a financial organization, for example. And then if you want to move it into your storage system for your AI, you only move what you need to, and it's a just-in-time kind of thing. Move it when you need it for the job. Not, I'm going to transfer my entire data estate to an entire new storage system just so I can do AI. And that's kind of the difference you would see. Do I buy a VAST and just put all the data I think I might need for AI in the VAST and then go do AI? That's an approach. Or do you take Hammerspace, make us aware of all the data in the organization when you want to do AI, whatever that is, you just move the data in just in time for that project and then it can stay there or it can be deleted. And it's two different approaches that enterprises have to make a decision on.
Well, in that scenario on the screen, if data center one, say, was in Europe and had data that could only be stored in Europe, and data center 2 was in North America, presumably Hammerspace with the metadata keeps track of which data can't be copied into an AI system.
We do, and we use a technology, actually, Lionel wrote it, Los Alamos National Labs wrote it, called Goofy, Goofy, G-U-F-I. And that not only tracks the metadata and the current system requirements, but the lineage of the data, so that goes with it as well. So, and so we have a lot of information on both data lineage as well as data policies. And then we have something called objectives, which are essentially a bunch of scripts that automate data movement, but they have to check against all of those things. So you can say, one objective is any data of this type can't leave Germany. Another is it can't be copied. You can't make a copy of it. You have to keep it. So there's a lot of data protection policies from that perspective.
I think you're presenting in, when Hammerspace was presenting in 23, I think you guys were talking about something like a potential 10x per year increase in the size of the market. So in other words, the growth potential was massive. Are you guys still thinking the same?
Well, I mean, the bigger you get, it's harder to do 10x at a time, but I mean, from a growth perspective, we hit those numbers and now it's starting to flatten out, as we grow with bigger numbers to grow on, yeah.
I think you're talking at some point to keep scale without doing a massive IPO in order to get more capital in to then expand even further. Is that still on the cards? Or?
I think that will be our exit, or I don't know if you call that an exit. I think that will be something we're doing, yeah. I mean, we haven't filed an S1 at this point. Confidence is extremely high, yeah. That's full on the intention. David has, our CEO, has zero intention of any other type of exit. And I mean, we get approached, as most companies do fairly often, and, we're not interested in selling the company.
Molly, since you mentioned VAST,
yeah.
Are you kind of competing, have you seen environments where you're competing head-to-head against VAST and kind of?
We compete head-to-head with VAST's roadmap, essentially. So their roadmap. Their core business of, cost-effective flash and some of the other things that, kind of are part of their storage system isn't really what we do. But they have a roadmap towards a lot of things like a global namespace, which is in the market. It's very early. Global namespaces are really hard to build and get reliable. So we have people ask us about it. But it's more some of their futures that they've announced in the last 6 months that look more competitive, but they're still on their roadmap. So it's a matter of, is the customer buying now, or are they planning for a year from now? And what that competitive landscape looks like. And conversely, I mean, we've realized we need to offer hardware solutions too. We love being a software company, we prefer to do that, but a lot of companies want to buy an appliance. That's why we did the partnership with Hitachi, for example, because they do that. But we're moving more and more in the direction of all our roadmap too. I know some of you, I know Chris has written about OFP. I mean, we have a really interesting hardware platform on our roadmap to come out in the future. So, we compete with them with our roadmap on the capacity or storage side. They compete with us with their roadmap on the data services side.
You talked about some of the, that was useful. You talked about
And just to say, I mean, we have several customers who use Hammerspace in front of VAST because they don't have the data services they need, so they just use their hardware. We ingest the metadata, and we actually become the namespace in front of VAST, which makes them crazy, because they're just not quite there yet.
One of the things that VAST talks about is the whole, I mean, there seems to be a full stack provider, right? They're going from the data layer right up almost into the application logic layer, if you like. So I'm wondering if, as well as kind of the downstream integrations, you're looking at upstream integrations into Databricks, Snowflake, those types of environments. Is that something that comes into conversation?
It is. I mean, we've had an integration with Snowflake for a couple of years now. Where we're most focused from a biz dev perspective right now, strategy is the vendors that Seamus mentioned, like OCI, Supermicro, and kind of what they want to do. The orchestrators on the GPU orchestration side, like ParallelWorks and companies like that. So the workflow automation piece is where we've spent most of our time versus the actual application. But imagine, you're moving a workflow and you need to use the GPUs over here instead of here. Great. Containerize and move the workflow, but you need the data there too. Creating that all to be automated is the primary focus right now, but we are looking upstream more and more. Companies I've never even heard of are coming to our kickoff and our sponsors, and they're those types of applications that want to come and kind of tickle our salespeople's ears. So it is happening quickly. I saw some people sign up for booths that are and they're signing up as platinum sponsors for our kickoff. I'm like, I don't even know who that company is. So it's a really dynamic space right now. All right, so I will just kind of say, so Hammerspace as an AI data platform, what customers are trying to do is buy an outcome. They're trying to have the way themselves organized so that they can do these inference pipelines when they're called upon to do it. Putting Hammerspace in place today makes them ready so they can say, hey, Mr. CIO, I'm ready to go. Some of them know exactly what they're going to do with it. Some of them have projects that are budgeted, and some are just seeing this as their AI readiness. And almost every organization now has an AI readiness budget and people who they're assigned to. Yeah?
Do you think you might pursue NVIDIA based on the SuperPod certification?
So they've closed those programs. People don't even work on them anymore. And it's kind of a contention we have with them. They're like, guys, you don't need it. It's fine. You're already deployed in these environments. And we're like, well, yes, but you've trained the market that you should ask for this. And they're like, but we've moved those people off. Like, the people don't even work on those programs anymore. So I don't know.
Close the program.
Yeah, they've moved on to the next thing, and so have the people. So it's not that they're not needed. They're not interested in continuing to certify vendors. So it's a little bit of a interesting situation where certainly we're running in both of those configurations, but I don't know if we'll ever have like the formal certification at this point or not, because they've moved on.
It's all about AIDP now for NVIDIA.
Mm-hmm. That's what their whole focus is on, is AIDP, which we have that.
And this is it's pretty fresh off the press since GTC a couple of weeks ago in Washington. A lot of their staff are only getting trained up on AIDP now, and they'll have an enablement program going through the partner ecosystem as well around AIDP. So you'll see more and more NVIDIA leading with that.
So what?
NVIDIA will come out with an AI DC certification list.
DC? What's that?
No, AI DC. What's she talking about?
From a data center certification perspective? Well, NVIDIA do a certain amount of data center certification already. I know that because I've worked at Digital Realty for 6 years. Whether they'll link that to this, I don't know. I mean, they're very focused on their AI factories and ensuring the customers understand the validated partner ecosystem for them.
Oh, sorry, you said AIDP, not AIDC.
No,
One sec.
AIDP. Yeah.
DP, yeah. And so that's what they see this as. This is an enabler that they believe every enterprise who is building an AI data factory needs to have one of these data platforms in place for it to run. That's kind of how they're thinking.
Sorry, a bit of a concurrent question from my side. So, just to understand, are you all into AI at the moment, or are you still having conversations with your customers about, let's say, the broader use case that you have for Hammerspace, the technology you have, for the unified, global namespace, some of the data management capabilities that you offer?
AI is, maybe 20% of our company is working on it. So it's important to us to, what we want is, because we're only a 4-year-old company from a sales perspective, we were late to SuperPod and some of those certifications, and NVIDIA had all they needed by the time we, kind of came to their attention. What we don't want to do is miss being early on their journey with the AIDP thing. But no, I mean, if you look at the list of customers we had, and I can send you like our customer deck of use cases, we do a lot in other areas for sure. Global namespace is the #1 thing that people are buying right now.
Yeah, I'm more thinking about, what happens there, because there's a huge hype, there's a lot of money, which is kind of circulating around, but then kind of bring about the post-AI state where things become normal and operationalized, and we're not going to think about it as this huge next big thing, but just something that comes as a kind of an incremental element that comes into any of the other tools that are using the organizations, right? So just know you are positioning yourself.
Yeah, and I like the way Jensen talks about this for NVIDIA. He calls it Brain 1 and Brain 2 is like their nomenclature. Brain 1 being their established business that's made them the massive company they are. Brain 2 being their new stuff. We don't call it that here, but we have kind of the same thing. We have our traditional business that has very traditional needs, and that's the majority of our business right now. And then we have a small group of specialists focused on some of these emerging things.
And I think the journey is different, quite honestly, for different customers. For the really large enterprises, global enterprises that we're working with, they're on a 2 or 3 year journey to really get their strategy right. And they're trying to do that at a time when the ecosystem is fluid and is evolving and is getting set. AIDP is obviously only a new reference design from NVIDIA. All of those things help cement and crystallize the strategies for those companies. And then over time, they start to bite off their projects. And of course, when you think of healthcare, and when we all get that first news story of the first cure for the first disease that came directly from AI, well, within enterprise organizations, when they deliver the first go-to-market new product that came from agents or some sort of new AI workflow, that's going to be the game changer for that particular organization, and then they're going to accelerate very, very fast. So our sense is that this is definitely a journey for customers over a 2 or 3 year period. And for the ones that take a strategic approach, they'll obviously be able to take advantage much more quickly from there. Other customers, though, will probably have a more bottom-up approach where they'll do skunkwork projects to address certain problems. And then they'll try to create a strategy afterwards. It's a little bit more difficult, but culturally, it might be the way that particular organization needs to operate. So, yeah, there's no one-size-fits-all.
How do you help your customers to have a good strategy to create an efficient data space?
Well, if I think about the press, the Vanderbilt is today, is it?
Yeah, Vanderbilt's the new
Vanderbilt's
customer
today.
story.
So when you look at customers like Vanderbilt, it becomes a consultative process between us and them. What's the capability of where our product is today? What our roadmap looks like for the future, right? So it becomes a much more strategic engagement rather than a buyer-seller engagement or a vendor-supplier engagement.
That's what I would expect.
Yeah.
But how does it work in practice? Because you can create like a data lake with huge amount of data, but then you essentially are creating a haystack with a lot of hay. where you still need to find needles. And how do you help them to find quicker the needles they need?
I don't know what you want to.
I mean, so like we have a lot of higher education, just university customers. And what we tend to find with them is they have more to do with less budget, something we've all heard forever. And they're trying to figure out a way to simplify their infrastructure and still meet their university's needs. So Vanderbilt, I just recorded a podcast with them while I was at Supercomputing this week. His very, simple to understand problem was they had run out of capacity for their researchers. And while they had capacity in other storage systems, they weren't the ones that were designed for the researchers. The researchers weren't connected to them. It didn't have the performance attributes they needed. And the university said, you have storage. I'm not going to let you buy any more. And their IT team was like, we have researchers down, and no, they can't use that storage because that's not what it was designed for. It wasn't fast enough or whatever it was. And so the university said, well, until you can figure out a way to use what you've already bought, you're not buying anything else. So he came and found Hammerspace, or was already talking to Hammerspace, and was like, let me put your global namespace in so that I can have, because we make even slow storage fast because we take metadata out band, and now all of a sudden the data path is faster. He's like, I'm going to go ahead and put Hammerspace in. Now all the capacity is available, and you meet the performance requirements. And he said, well, the university usually doesn't let us buy software. They require us to buy hardware. We don't have a software budget. They let me buy it because it unlocked this capacity. And those use cases at universities are really common, where I have 5 different types of storage for 5 different things, and I need to simplify because I don't get as many IT people as I used to. I'm going to simplify by just putting everything in Hammerspace. Now I just have one file system and one namespace to manage. That's essentially our university story. It's super reproducible and easy to do.
And I think at a tactical level, all of our customers run through a POC process of some description, right? So it's independently, each of those customers that we're working with take a different view of how they want to conduct that POC first, right? Some customers want to go large early, and other customers, like I think Simon brought it up earlier, maybe other customers want to start really small. And so it becomes an iterative journey, which is why I keep using the word consultative, because it's never a product sale. It's definitely a strategic and a consultative sale, and it's definitely a journey that we end up on with them right through. And that's why the partner community and the partner ecosystem love it.
Can I ask a quick clarifying question on the NVIDIA relationship? Because when I go on their AI data platform page, there are 12 partners listed, and they're all storage vendors, but you guys aren't on there?
Yeah.
So
No, it's an interesting company. No, so they did the press release with us at GTC that our reference architecture is the direction that they're going to go with AIDP. There's a lot I really can't say, but Hammerspace makes data mobility and the ability to ingest data from where it sits and move data to wherever you want to use it. That's the way data platforms should run for an inference type of workload. They created a bunch of partners that were storage silos, just like BasePod, and it was just a different program name. So consider all the BasePod customers became DP partners, and there was no change in functionality. And then they realized what Hammerspace can do, and they're like, oh God, this is actually what it should be. So they certified our reference architecture. They're doing all the things with all of our people there with their people. They're planning release, announcements of what these certified programs look like. But they're in the middle of a shift. And I really just can't say anything more than that because I don't want to get in trouble with them. Yeah, exactly. But
is it because you guys aren't a target per se? Because you guys aren't a storage target?
No, we're the data estate is what they call it. Right. And so it's a different layer from the storage systems that they essentially just forklift, moved from BasePod to DP, and then realized this was available. And so they did, big wigs there were quoted in our press releases together and stuff, but they haven't created an iteration to that certification program. And so it is important to us. Our core business is all these other things that we're talking about right now, but it's nice to be friends with them, and we want to be friendly with them, certainly.
Thank you.
All right, so Tier 0 we announced about a year ago while we were here at this event. And it has had really substantial implications within the industry. For those of you who don't know exactly what it is or need a refresher, it's essentially compute nodes, whatever the compute node is, GPUs, DPUs, CPUs, tends to have local storage within it. That has never been used as protected shared storage because there was no way to protect it. Your node goes down. Compute nodes infamously go down pretty often. You can't have your data go down with your compute node. It needs to be higher reliability. But it's really interesting if you can use that storage because it's super low latency, super high performance. In a lot of cases, it's an investment that they already have. So even the Vanderbilt company who I was just talking about, Vanderbilt University, they had this problem I already shared with you where their researchers didn't have capacity and they needed to come to Hammerspace to unlock the capacity in their home directory storage for their researchers. They also have available NVMe in their compute nodes. And by deploying Tier 0, which makes it that you have you can take all of that NVMe and put it into a global namespace. So now it is actually a part of the shared storage. Our data policies protect it, so you make mirrored copies immediately on write, so it's not just in one compute node. So there's things we do to overcome why people haven't used it as shared storage. Now our customers are saying, oh great, this is storage I already have deployed, configured, purchased, and I'm just going to add it into my global namespace and have a new tier of really fast storage. Meta was using this when they moved from using Hammerspace just in the data center up into Oracle. They wanted to use Tier 0 because the Oracle shapes that have GPUs in them already have NVMe too, and Oracle's like, we're using that, and we're going to use Hammerspace Tier 0, which caused Oracle to take a look at us and understand what we were offering. And they have now really leaned in on making Hammerspace an offering within Oracle because of our Tier 0 capabilities. So Meta got their attention, and this kind of goes back to how we're selling and how we're getting the attention of our customers, is you find either a big integrator who's leading us into the deal, or somebody like Meta who's already integrated with us and are using us, and they pull us into the strategic partners. What got Oracle's attention was this number here, which you can't all see, but we were 50% faster than their managed Lustre environment. So Oracle had put all this work into a managed Lustre environment for training needs and AI, and the Hammerspace was running 50% faster. And Lustre is known to be the fastest file system in the world, and it is fast, but not in when you can't control the environment. Lustre is really good if you can design the hardware, design the network, tightly control it. In the cloud, you can't do that. The networking often is not very fast. Shapes come and go. You get different sizes, and Lustre doesn't perform very well there. So the cloud companies are realizing for very fast speed, which Hammerspace as a software-defined solution does very well here. We're very fast, and they take advantage of the Tier 0 too, so you get storage capacity in addition to speed. So Hammerspace Tier 0 is really what most of our customers are now using. I would say 70% of our customers now are starting to implement Tier 0 in their environments just because they have the NVMe sitting in those compute nodes, and why not? So the adoption is very high. And I would say about 20% of our new deals are because of Tier 0. So it's definitely been adopted as a new tier of storage that you can then, within that same namespace, use the storage you already have, the Cloudian Object Store, or the Pure Storage, or Vast NVMe type of storage. So what they're doing is essentially saying, let's use Hammerspace, aggregate it all, including the NVMe and whatever infrastructure I have today, into a single storage pool.
Do you have any information on what the utilization rates of that Tier 0 storage is? If you changes?
The utilization of it?
Yeah, because got so much tier 0 storage, how much of the clients that are using it actually using it at any one time? Are they running it at 60, 70, 80, 90% or 100%? And just the contents changes, when they need to change?
Yeah, I don't know. I've never run that metric, but I can tell you what the use case is initially we were saying just use it at kind of like scratch space, super fast writes. And then we would immediately mirror protect it. So not erase your code, but mirror protect it to another node. And then as it got full, we had objectives to tier it out. Pretty simple tiering kind of thing. This latest release, the 5.2 release of software, which we just released this week, how customers are using that, our early adopter customers who already have it, it's called affinitization. And this answers the question of what are we doing with upstream partners, is we now have the ability to affinitize data that already exists and put it into the GPU node where the application is calling on it. So tier 0 started out as just simple tiering. Now it's place the data, affinitize it to where the job is being scheduled to run. Much more interesting then.
Is that caching? Is that similar to a caching algorithm? It sounds like it's. Am I in the right form?
Yeah, KV caching and.
Yeah, I mean it will be a part of our KV cache solution.
It's just a terrible name, by the way.
What is?
Infinitization.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it has node affinity. It's more of an action than a product name. Like, that's just how the engineers write it. So the idea is that if the data can be where it's going to be used, then it's a lot more useful.
Are you trying to predict what data will be needed by the GPU?
Yes and no. We do have predictive behavior of, so the first step is a Slurm job or some kind of job scheduler runs, and it says, I'm going to grab these 3 nodes and I need this data. We have the intelligence, which we've always had, of predicting what other data might need to be moved to.
Yeah,
so, yeah, I think that's a way to think about it.
Great computer scientist, me.
Yeah, I'm not a great computer scientist, but that's a way to think about it. Is the reason we had the data prediction in the past was in a hybrid environment where you had a bunch of data sitting in S3, and you knew a job was running in the data center. Let's predict which data needs to start to move, so you didn't have to wait for as much data. That's why we had it originally. Now we're using that same technology to, once the job scheduler says, I'm going to reserve these GPUs for this job, we'll move the data it asks for, but predictively figure out which other data might need to go and pre-warm the tier 0. So yeah, it's very cachy, I would say. What's nice about it is it's a part of just this big shared global namespace. It's not its own isolated memory.
So you're moving data around, but not permanently. You move the data onto the GPU for that job and off again.
Exactly.
Would you stick around, if there was no reason to move it off, but you just stick around in that GPU ready for the next use?
That depends on how the customer's objectives are set. So our objectives are our policies. Okay. It would depend on what they want. We could make it where it's a move into tier 0, or it could be a copy. It could be an either or. And then once it's moved or copied, does it just stay there until a capacity bottleneck is hit or not? So that's all very configurable depending on the behavior they want.
How much help do they get on this sort of configuration? It seems to me that it's incredibly powerful, but you can also get it wrong.
Which is why you've heard Seamus say the word consultative like 100 times already today. You're correct. We're starting to build a nice repository of these objectives. So essentially scripts that we wrote a bunch that are in the product, but customers, we have a documented API, they can write their own. As they write them or we help them write them, we have a repository so others can use them. But our deployment model is you sit down, once we've done the POC and we're getting ready to deploy, we help them set up all of their objectives to make sure the behavior they want. So, and we talk to them about it because sometimes they haven't even thought through what behaviors they want. And we have enough experience with it now to ask the questions of, now have you thought about if this happens, then what happens? So we have a very specific process for
That
that.
could be an AI application, couldn't it? Which actually,
It's funny you say that, yeah.
English, natural language, says, what are you trying to achieve?
We actually have written one of those. It's funny you bring that up. It's not productized. One of the guys in Tony Asaro's team, who some of you know Tony from other worlds, has written an AI tool for exactly that. And we haven't productized or released it yet because we haven't tested if it does the right things, but we're thinking along the same lines.
It looks like you're building a paper kit.
It looks like what?
It looks like you're building a paper kit. Do you want to call your paper kit?
Yeah. So
I think from a customer perspective, there's the functionality, and whether you call it a form of caching or not, I think the bigger picture that we're seeing with customers around the table is that the fact that this is part of a global namespace means that, like, I referred earlier, if you look at any kind of CIO or industry reports by any of the OEMs, largely in 2025, they'll tell you that 75% of their POCs failed, right? They've typically failed for two large reasons. Cost, the TCO, they just couldn't make the TCO work, right? Or two, they couldn't get the quality data to the AI pipelines that they needed at the level of performance that they needed. So the fact that we've created this tier 0 that sits within the global namespace and data can be readily orchestrated and automated to that tier 0, right, which is local to the GPUs and gives a level of performance unseen before by those enterprises. That's the big news flash for tier 0, and that's why OCI, for themselves, both internally and now with their customers, they're actively bringing customers to us because of what tier 0 can unlock for those customers.
That's still, I mean, just provoking a bit of illumination here. That's still going to be slow and low utilization. You've got your mirror, say it's grade 1, and so you've only got 50% utilization. You've got to wait for the acknowledgement of the rates. If the customer has money, they're going to be better using a vast shared solution system. So that's my point.
I wouldn't think about it that way. I understand what you're saying, but no, mirroring's super fast. I mean, like, that's like way faster than erasure coding and going across the network. So it's speed-wise, and we have benchmarks that have made the storage community go crazy. Because like when we submitted our ML perf benchmarks, all the storage companies we've all been talking about today said, hey, that's not fair. You can't do that. You can't use the NVMe in a storage system, and because it's not shared storage, which we make it, but we are like 10x faster. It's incredibly blazing fast. But to your point of utilization, the way most of the customers think about it is, this is NVMe they've already bought. It's already sitting unused in their environment. Sure. Even though mirroring's not an efficient data protection method, we just mirror for immediate data protection. So the issue of, I wrote to node 1 and server nodes aren't very reliable, it goes down, I lost my data. We do an immediate mirror just for immediate protection, but then get it off to shared storage if it needs longer term. Yeah. And it's a way to get, you know, like, when X was training Grok, it was like 40 petabytes of this that they could put to use. I mean, it was just sitting unused. So in some environments, it's a massive cost savings.
So are you actually moving the data out of other tiers into this tier 0 so it doesn't exist anymore in the other tiers, or is it being replicated?
It depends on what the customer wants to do. We can do either. So if they want to retire a tier and use this as their permanent storage, I don't think any of our customers are really doing that.
If this is moving to hotspot, are you actually moving when the data's moved to the hotspot? Is it moved out of the other storage?
It can be a copy or a move. It's up to them. So it depends on what their workflow is and what they're trying to do. So it could be a move, and then it has to move back. Or it could be a copy, do some jobs, and delete it off of tier 0, or it could be a copy and stay there. The workflows are all really different.
GPU workloads, I think it needs to be much more an inclusive cache type approach. So you can have different copies of the data being used because different GPUs will have access to the same data and use something like a noisy protocol to manage access and have a directory system to handle the snoops and things. But
yeah, and I think if you're the customer that has that view, you can do that. Yeah, for sure. And remember, this is a seismic shift for those customers, because not only are you giving them that performance that tier 0 gives them, but you're also giving them the capability or enabling them to get data that otherwise they couldn't access and get to that pipeline at all. So it's a real game changer for customers, and it's been a game changer for our relationship with OCI.
It's quite an open question, so you may dodge it successfully. The contradiction between what you can do and what drives the storage vendors crazy. Why can't they do what you do? Kind of an obvious question, but I'd like to summarise what you think about.
So think of that about the scale-out NAS guys, fast, Isilon, those types of architectures. Data has to come into a NAS target, go through into their controllers, their scale-out controllers, which is where it gets processed, and then it gets pushed down to storage. It is a very rigid architecture as far as from the whatever the NFS point through their storage, their controllers into the data storage. They don't have storage controllers in the GPU nodes, so they don't have any way to be aware of that data. Parallel file systems like Lustre or GPFS or something like that, while they could put a client in the GPU node, which NVIDIA doesn't like, we can do it because it's built into Linux already. Our client is built into Ubuntu or any distribution of Linux. So we already have intelligence in every GPU node in the world right now that's just waiting to be activated. But even if their client were there, they don't have a global namespace. So it would be a fast single storage silo on GPU node 1, 2, 3, 4. Now all of a sudden you have 100 silos of data that you have to deal with. For us, it goes into the global namespace immediately, so you have visibility in one namespace of all of those. So those are the two reasons, the namespace and then our architecture that our clients are already built into the GPU nodes.
It's just be a commodity now.
It is.
Well, it kind of isn't, but it's kind of
it will be.
prioritized into those vendors, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. And that is our vision, and the press release we're putting out later today essentially says that. Now that Linux is becoming the standard, and we've shown that NFS can be fast enough for these incredibly fast workloads, and these Linux storage capabilities are built into every compute node, there's really no reason for proprietary storage. Of course, it takes the industry a while to shift, and the Open Flash Platform Initiative, which we're heavily involved in, is going so far as put a DPU into a node and have Linux running local with the SSD, and all of a sudden you just don't have a storage controllers built into the device itself. At that point, it will be completely commoditized, and Samsung, SK Hynix, all of them are working on it with us. So I think you're right. And that's what happened with the compute industry. It used to be very proprietary. And then the first supercomputer that was built on Linux showed you could do it on standards. And then the industry shifted that way. I think that's what's happening with data right now.
And just on the global namespace, it's a little bit, for me, it's a little bit like hearing about the World Series, right? Which isn't truly a World Series, right? Global namespace for most vendors that you hear from, except for Hammerspace. Hammerspace is truly a global namespace across the entire infrastructure estate. For other storage vendors, they'll talk about a global namespace, but what they're talking about is within their silo. Or they don't at all, correct.
So just an implementation, we have about 10 minutes left, so I want to make sure we get through the last few things. What this looks like within Oracle is you have your Oracle infrastructure. What you're seeing here is our metadata. So we go in and we ingest the metadata. We use the word assimilate the metadata into the Hammerspace environment. Now the metadata servers in Oracle can see all the data that's sitting in a customer's data center or other cloud environments. This could be AWS, whatever. And they know what data is there. And when they want to use Oracle's GPUs, so this is the Oracle GPU team, they instantly can say, okay, I know which data I have. I can invoke a job to start to move that data into Oracle, but because the customer has already bought the GPU shape that has the GPUs they need, there's actually storage there also. They don't have to sell any other storage in Oracle to run that compute job. every other vendor they work with, including their own storage and file systems, they also need to use some of this other storage. So it's more expensive. You all of a sudden have networking challenges and things get slower. So Oracle sees this as a super cool way to capture GPU, selling GPU business with their customers. They have visibility of the data. It's really efficient. And they just love it. And they're pulling us into their customers very rapidly for exactly that use case.
Just make sure I understand this. How completely virtualized is this? So if I've got a mixed workload in which some things need to be on tier 0 for speed, other things are going on at the same time, can you just set policies that say that job type A is 50% more important than job type B, and just let the system deliver to those policies? And if you then find that job type A isn't going fast enough, you can up its priority a bit. Or if you find that job type A is stopping job type B running at all, you can
we can do that within our system, and it's also part of what the tie is going with the job schedulers, because the job schedulers also know priority. And so they have some decisions they make at the job scheduling job of which job's most important. And then we have it from a resource utilization perspective, which types of jobs get fast versus slow storage or priority. Yeah. We're not a job scheduler from the classical, like what Slurm or something does. What we can do is help data to behave the way we want to based on the type of data it is, or who the user or owner of the data is, or the directory it's in, something like that.
So I can look at a policy statement in Hammerspace, which could be understood by the CEO if he wants to know.
Absolutely, it's natural. Our GUI has very simple, natural language, things that anyone could understand. And then if you have developers who want to code against our API, they can do that.
One of the problems I found with tuning systems was that you had to actually convey what the tuning was doing.
Well, and that's why we call them objectives. They're not instead of policies. It says subtlety in language, but it's what are you trying to accomplish, not tell me how to do it. So I want to accomplish sovereignty of my data. Okay, how? What are the constraints? So it's written that way.
Yeah, I'm surprised every bit of IT doesn't work that way these days.
Yeah, so just to give you a feel for speed, I need to jump on to one other thing, but the red here, these are our performance benchmarks in Oracle. This is us testing against our own technology, and it's just showing, about an 8x improvement in read speeds of tier 0 versus our own technology in Oracle in tier 1. So that's the kind of performance you're seeing on the read side. And then on the write side, it's about 3x. So depending on the workload, it's substantially faster. And of course, it's low latency because you don't have all the network hops sitting in between them. So it is screaming fast storage that most customers already have deployed. The last thing that I really wanted to cover today, you will receive a press release in a bit with our IO500 results. And what was really cool is we took this new software release, the version 5.2, which we released this week, or announced at Supercomputing, that had a few really key major improvements that we had. With it, I'll say this now, and if I have to change it later, which I don't think I'll have to, it's the fastest benchmark on NFS ever written, and it sits in the neighborhood of some of the fastest Lustre benchmarks that have ever been run. And what's cool about this is, we talk about standards and how cool it is to take advantage of the infrastructure you already have and all of these different pieces of it. This will become a standard. But if a customer has to have it be slower or something, their workload slows down, it's not worth it. So we've proven now that PNFS is right up there in the fastest benchmarks ever. And how we did this with our 5.2 release was implemented the ability to have scale out metadata. So our ability to scale our metadata servers to for both redundancy but also performance. We did a bunch of improvements there. We added in a couple of new capabilities into the Linux client so that when you look at what's in the Linux distributions now, we have the ability to bypass any of the internal networking within the server, and we have the ability, even if Tony doesn't like the name, of this affinitization of data going to the correct GPU node. And having the ability to make sure that when you're running a workload across multiple compute nodes at the same time simultaneously, so thinking of a traditional parallel file system, you either are running multiple streams at the same time across compute nodes, or you have multiple servers running on the same file. We have the ability now to make either of those work within these environments. So this really reduces the east-west traffic constraints within a cluster and makes us less dependent on the internal networking, like within a cloud, for example. We also put a fair bit of scale into our namespace, being able to scale the number of members within the namespace, the number of directories, the number of everything that is being included within our namespace has grown substantially. And this is just a side piece. Security, as you can imagine, we get challenged on all the time. Now you're gaining access to my, financial business units data. We're deploying in an enterprise instead of a research institute. When you go into a bank, their security requirements are very different than Meta's, who controls their entire infrastructure and doesn't necessarily have privacy concerns in the same way that the bank does. So we've had to add a lot into our security capabilities to make sure that in these enterprises that we've been talking about today, we can get past the sniff test of their security teams. And that's all been released now too. We've already talked a lot about Oracle. And then the last thing I want to talk about with our S3 connector, we get asked a lot, like, that's cool, great, NFS is super fast, but isn't everything going to S3? I mean, that's what all the cloud, and object vendors would say. We have an S3 interface too, but it does some pretty interesting things that when you write data in over NFS, you can read it out over S3 or vice versa. And we have shared metadata. So all that cool metadata that object stores have, we just import that into our global metadata too. And so when customers are implementing their AI workloads and they have a bunch of object data, we'll ingest the metadata from those object stores just like we do the file systems. And we can present out on either side, depending on which protocol the application prefers. The largest at scale test we had was when Meta did this, because they were moving their data from their data centers for like the Llama 2 training into Oracle. And the speeds that they were accomplishing was faster than Oracle could actually accept the data because they're networking. So we are talking more about S3 and objects, and not as a either or decision, but again, put it into a global namespace and a global file system that can do either. And that way, when you have training jobs running off a file and all the rest of your AI workload running off of object, you can do it off a single data estate. And that's what most customers are saying, that would be optimal. I don't want to have to choose. And I think, Fred, we're out of time. And I'm just going to put this up, the Vanderbilt story. You'll get a press release on this. So that's releasing today. It already came out? Okay, perfect. Good. My team's doing magical things while I fly. But this is the story I talked about in one of these universities, that they ended up cutting their blended costs by 67%. They went from about $300 a terabyte to $100 a terabyte. Because they had, in previous environment, they had a lot of different storage systems, and some of them cost $500 a terabyte, some cost $50 a terabyte. That overall they were paying $300 a terabyte for storage here, and now they're doing it with $100 a terabyte with Hammerspace, and have access to all the capacity, so they, even if they have deployed capacity somewhere else.
Why does it say 48% there, but the next slide says 67?
I don't know, I didn't write this slide, but I know the numbers were 300. Oh, I see where you're pointing at, but the numbers are, they went from 300 a terabyte to $100 a terabyte. I don't know why they did that. I don't know.
And that goes back to the commodity conversation that we had earlier on. And it also, it's the saving that they have right now, but it's a go forward saving that they've got now, because strategically now they can build out on a commodity environment.